Billy Preston and Nightlife Band. You know, I'm reading a book. It's Learned Pigs and Fireproof Women. Not a weird title, and this is a book about all the really eccentric and amazing kind of entertainers, real strange stories. And it was written by Ricky Jay. But in addition to writing this book, Ricky Jay is a very unusual entertainer himself, and he's a great sleight of hand artist. Please welcome him, Ricky Jay.
Thank you very much. This evening I'm going to attempt a feat of sleight of hand so difficult I was forced to borrow this suit in order to perform it. I'm going to step towards the audience and ask people who I have never met to aid me in this particular effect. The woman sitting here on the aisle, may I ask you to actually select a card, make it a free choice, don't let me influence you in any way. No, you really must reach in and take a card. I'll tell you what, let me turn these around. Take one with room to write. In other words, one without a picture, so you can write your name with a pen, which I will give you in a moment. I'd like you also to take a card, if you don't mind, one with room to write. Good. Now I'm going to ask you to write your name on the pen. Who here, with a pen? Who here has a felt tip pen? I do. And if you would also do the same quickly, pretending that this was, in fact, an important part of the effect you're witnessing. Write your name, something to identify it. That's enough time. I must take the card back. May I have the card, please? I will take the card and show it to the camera and to you at home. The first of two selected cards. I'll also be taking a second card. Hopefully there is a signature on this card as well, and that can be seen by the folks at home as well as in the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, it may come as no surprise that I'm going to find the two cards which have just been selected. But what makes this so unusual is the way in which I will find these cards is considered by many the most dangerous and daring card trick ever performed. Would you quickly name your card? Name it out loud. And your card?
5 of diamonds.
Watch closely. Yes, 4 and 5 of diamonds. Your signatures. Your signature.
Ricky Jay will be back with us right after this. Great. Okay, welcome back. You know, this is the title alone makes people buy the book, I'm sure. Learned Pigs and Fireproof Women. Now, you got to explain that title.
Well, they're really, this is going to sound like an awfully mundane answer in view of the strangeness of the title, but there really were learned pigs, and there really were fireproof women. I mean, incombustible women, women who went into raw ovens. Signora Giardelli, who in 1818 walked into an oven with 2 raw steaks in her hand. She emerged tartare, and the steaks were cooked to perfection. And there are also people like Toby, the sapient pig, who was able to write his own autobiography and add numbers and.
That's a real pig.
A real pig. I'm talking about live pigs, yeah. I mean, in the early years, in the 18th century and the 19th century, they exhibited live pigs. What happens today is you much more see, rather than effects of spelling and arithmetic that were done, pigs which have been trained to do different stunts. They're more like gymnastic or acrobatic pigs rather than scholarly ones. I guess they figure mortar boards don't sell anymore. And I guess around 1900, there was a group called Fred Leslie's Circus that had a trained pig act. And the problem with any sort of trained pigs is they got to be too large. You know, they'd train them, they'd be around for a long time, and then they'd grow to be enormous, so they were always breaking in young shoats. And in this one story, which I think is a great overview of show business in general, they trained these young pigs to replace the old ones. And one day when this circus moved to an adjacent farm, you know, the circus lot was next to a farm, Fred Leslie sold the old fat pigs to the farmer who lived right by the circus. And that night, as the music started, the young pigs took lighting ponds and trapezes and go up seesaws. The music started, and the old pigs heard their music and climbed over the fence separating the farm from the circus and moved into the circus tent and pushed the little pigs off the sliding ponds and trapezes and did their own act again.
That's what they still do in show business.
You bet.
Right? The show must go on.
Exactly.
The old pigs are still around pushing us. Well, how did when there was one interesting? Well, they're all interesting. One that got my eye was the man a woman who wrote with her feet and her hands simultaneously.
Yeah, there are 2 people I write about in the book, a man named Harry Kahn, the multiple mental marvel, and a woman named Thea Alba, who wrote with chalk extended from 10 different fingers. She could write 10 numerals
here we have a picture up here on the monitor.
At the same time. Yeah, in this picture she's writing with both her hands and legs. There's yet another picture in the book where she's writing 10 different digits at the same time.
Didn't they call her the woman with 10 brains or something?
Yes, they did, indeed. They called her the woman with 10 brains. A billing I've tried to get, but it's never worked.
And what about the man who, Johnny X?
Oh, let me tell you this. This is probably the most bizarre story that I know in the history of magic. In the 20s, sawing a woman in half became a great craze in America, and people were looking for variations. And some years later, a person thought, a strange magician named Raja Raboid, thought that it would be amusing to take someone out of the audience and saw them in half instead of using his own assistant. And so in the beginning of the show, he asked a man to step on stage. He put him in a box. He took a saw, and with an assistant, they sawed the box in half. So far, absolutely conventional. They pushed the 2 halves together. They closed them up. The man stood up, completely restored, and walked back to the audience. And as he took 3 or 4 steps, he suddenly toppled over, literally at the waist, and his trunk walked off the stage left, and the legs walked off to the stage right. And people gasped, and women fainted, and they never did this act again, needless to say. It caused such a remarkable reaction. And the way it was done is that they had a pair of pants over the head of a midget, and a man named Johnny Eck, who had only a trunk and above. He had no lower body. And so he walked off stage left, he crawled off, and you're seeing a picture of Johnny Eck now. He literally had no lower body, and then the midget walked off stage right. But what gave this effect such a remarkable feeling was that the man who came out of the audience in the beginning of the stunt was Johnny Eck's full-sized, identical twin brother.
Oh, really?
Yeah, think about that.
Yeah, looking up to your brother, and oh, wow.
It's not quite the image I
Yeah,
had in
right,
mind,
yeah.
but it's-
Looking at, you know what must have really been weird, too, is when the legs walked off, they saw an eye looking out the fly, you know? That's probably why they were throwing up.
You've always had this sense of detail that I find frightening. I don't know.
And what about Willard, the
Man Who Grows? Yeah, he did a wonderful act. He went on stage and gave a sort of pseudo-scientific talk on the properties of growth. And as he was talking to you, he wound up growing 6 inches taller than the man he was standing next.
Oh, yeah, we have it here.
Yeah, you have a picture of him.
growing?
Right. It's an example. You see 3 different photos with him getting taller and taller. And it's not that he's just straightening out the neck muscles. He did this. But he used to tell stories like dancing with a countess at a party. And while he was dancing with her, he would grow 5 or 6 inches, and she would faint. And he used to find this an amusing way to spend the evening. So.
Well, I mean, you know what's interesting to me, 2 things. First of all, how he did it. Well, but the other thing is that if you look at the picture, you notice he grew, but his clothes grew with him. I mean, how did that happen? It's not like, I remember growing over a summer 6 inches when I was 14, and my pants were real short. His pants stayed the same.
It's fun. It reminds me, the old joke of going to a tailor, what a difficult figure to fit. But he used to do that, to go to tailors and get measured for a suit, and one sleeve would be 4 inches too long, and he would have to pull out his arm and make the sleeve fit. Then they would make that sleeve longer. Then he would be 3 inches taller.
Well, how did he do it? I mean,
It was done by physical means, and he was a magician at the early part of his career.
But, you mean he could actually stretch his muscles? Or?
Exactly. He actually wrote books about auto relaxation and stretching muscles, and he did it by physical means. He didn't have a motor which enabled him to spring forward. Yeah.
Oh, gee, that would be a great thing to have, standing on a subway and just suddenly rising above everyone. You could have the whole car to yourself in moments. Well, then there was the man, Ali.
Haji Ali. Yeah, he was one of a long series of water spouters. Back in the 17th century, water spouting was probably as popular as the hula hoop. And people would swallow vast quantities of water, gallons of water, and then make these beautiful, graceful arcs spewing water a long way. There's a great story about a man in France in 1656 named Jean Royer who was able to spout water for as long as it took to walk 200 paces or recite the 51st Psalm. But Haji Ali, who you were just showing on the picture in the 20s, did a wonderful stunt. He would put a little house on stage, and he would swallow an enormous quantity of water, followed immediately by an enormous quantity of gasoline at one time. They would light the little building on stage. He would spew the water, which would make the building, spew the gasoline, which would make the building ignite in flame, and then acting as sort of a vaudeville fireman, he would then spew the water and put out the fire that he had started.
Well, I don't understand.
Most people don't.
We did it as kids at school and got in a lot of trouble for that. Remember, put out the house is on fire, your house and you're on fire, and all the guys would get around the fella? You don't remember this?
Is that what you're...
No, we never spit. We wouldn't do anything like spit. But we had all these spouts going towards them, and then...
I'm beginning to get the picture, yes.
You never played House on Fire? It was a great game. Well, we'll be back with more strange acts after this. You never played House on Fire? Here was Ricky Jay talking about some of the most bizarre acts in show business. There was an interesting case of a man, Blind Tom, who started out as a child, and they discovered something real interesting about him.
Yeah, it is an interesting story. They thought when he was a youngster that first of all, he was sighted at birth, and then very shortly thereafter lost his eyesight, but he seemed to be almost imbecilic. He seemed to have no way of expressing himself or talking with making any sense, and he was a slave born to plantation owners in Georgia, and he used to pinch his brothers and sisters and sort of revel in the screams and shrieks that they would make, and they thought he was a sadistic child. But one day someone in the plantation house played a tune on the piano, and the child sat down and absolutely duplicated this tune at the piano. And people seemed quite amazed by this, and they started to see if they could develop this talent. And as it turned out, through his entire career, he had the ability to play any musical tune that he would hear on one playing. And there were stories told that a man visited the plantation when he was 10 years old and played an original composition. He didn't see that man again for 14 years, and when the man came into his house and he announced his name, Blind Tom sat down at the piano and absolutely duplicated this tune. He also composed his own music during the Civil War. He became a major concert attraction in Europe and the capitals of America.
Could he read and write or anything?
No,
he couldn't read or write or anything?
No,
I remember reading that he would spin around, he would hear the tune and do a turn, right?
He seemed to actually be unable to control his physical movements. As a matter of fact, he sometimes played Put the Fire Out on stage because
really?
Yeah, he was unable to control himself, but he had this utterly remarkable ability to play incredible Beethoven sonatas. I mean, and he could do odd things like play with the wrong hands, turn his back to the piano and play the right hand part with the left hand and the left hand part with the right hand. I mean, An utterly extraordinary character.
And then he went on. This is an idiot savant, they call it.
That's what
He
the
can do one thing
general
very,
terminology, yeah.
very well. Then he went on in the whole conservatory. He played in Europe. He played before royalty, didn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. A major attraction. And the leading musicians of the day, Moschels and Thalberg, all visited him.
Excuse me, Rick.